Hey guys, welcome to this video. I'm from the Salesforce Reels team, and this video is going to be a little different, and we're going to be building out an actual example with Visualforce wrapper classes and allowing mass edit functionality on a Visualforce page. So basically, the functionality of this Visualforce page is going to be that it is going to load some of the account records that I have in our org. Then they would be displayed in a list with a checkbox next to each of those accounts, and then the user can edit the values for those account records, click the checkboxes next to them, and then there is going to be an edit button in the top and a delete button at the top. And that is how we are going to be building that page. So the first thing to doing something like this, whenever you work on problems like these, is actually designing your Apex class and your data structures first. So let's go ahead and create an Apex class here. I'm gonna call it mass edit controller. That sounds pretty good. Obviously, since this is gonna be a Visualforce controller, I'm gonna go ahead and create a constructor for this. Pretty simple, right? Now, since our functionality is gonna be giving the user an option to not update all the accounts, but instead have them selectable by a checkbox. So what that means is that checkbox is not a field on the account. It's that checkbox's functionality is just specific to this particular Visualforce page. So a good decision to build something like this is create a separate wrapper class for it. And I'm gonna say this as account wrap, right? Pretty straightforward. Then I'm going to have a boolean here which says selected. And since this is gonna go on my Visualforce page, I'm gonna put a getter setter on it. Then we have the second part of it, which is gonna actually store the account data that I'm going to have. So this is gonna be an instance of the account object like this. And again, since this is gonna go to my Visualforce page, this is also gonna be a getter setter. Then I'm gonna define a constructor for this wrapper class like this. And it's gonna be pretty simple. I'm just gonna initialize all my values. The boolean, oops, not the boolean, but selected. This dot selected is gonna be false. Here, this keyword, this actually refers to the particular instance. So just standard nomenclature while doing this. And again, you're gonna do this dot acc equals to new account. So we have both of our stuff initialized. Now, since I'm going to be having multiple of accounts being edited, I designed this wrapper class in a way where I can use a list of this wrapper as for my data. So I'm gonna do a list of this account wrap here and call this all data. Again, this wrapper is gonna be used on my Visualforce page. So I'm going to define the getter setter on this wrapper. Now, the next part is actually you want to populate or fill this list with all the data, right? Basically, that is what you want to do. So the one way to do it is like querying all your account data and filling it inside of your constructor. But just for the ease of reusability, I'm going to define a separate method here and call it populate data like this. And in here, what I'm going to do is we're going to initialize this list and just fill this list up with our data from the account object. How can we do that? I'm going to do an SQL query, AC, and what all fields do I bring in? The ID and then for now. So let's just do this two, or let me check and maybe pull one another field. Let's go to the fields in our org. Let's maybe hmm, let's maybe pull this date field, a custom field which has the name of SLA expiration date. So this is a date field and I'm gonna pull this one too from account, and for now we want to limit the data that we receive to 10 accounts, just for example purposes. So once you have queried this data, you need to fill this list up. So how do we fill this list up? We define a new instance of this wrap like this. Then inside of this wrapper, we're gonna fill the ACC value with the data that we queried like this. So this basically defines a new instance of this wrapper. And then this ACC account instance is like equated to whatever account data we got from the SQL query. And then this wrapper goes, this wrapper that we just created inside the for loop goes to my main list right here, like this. So what we did here was we created a method just to query and populate this list again. Again, pretty simple. And if you guys just implement it out yourself, you should be able to do it pretty easily. Now, we just have one part left to set up the initial Apex controller of ours, and that is calling this populate data method when our Visualforce page loads from the constructor of our Apex controller. So inside the constructor, I'm just going to call this populate data method like this. This makes sure that whenever somebody opens our page, the first thing that happens is this populate data method is called and our data is repopulated with an SQL query from the backend. Now, once we are done with this initial setup of our Apex controller, we might have to add more functionality in this later, but now we're gonna go ahead and design the Visualforce page. And I'm gonna call it mass edit account. Click on OK. Now, let's say I'm gonna remove the sidebar from it. Gonna keep the header, but the second important thing we want to do is associate this with our Apex controller right here. So, like this, like this, right? So now this VF page is associated with our Apex class. Now the next part is gonna be like showing what data we are getting first. Let's design a simple UI for that. So I'm gonna do a new page block. Well, why is this not working? For some reason it's not, but okay, it work now. And let's just put a title of mass edit accounts on it. And we're gonna have a page block section inside of it like this. Now inside of our page block section, let's just see what it looks like right now. So I'm gonna preview it, and as you can see, a little UI has been built out. We can see the page block and we're able to see a little empty space here. Now, how do we actually print out this wrapper that we just filled in our example? So we have a lot of ways to do this. We can use a page block table, but for simplicity's sake, we're just gonna do the other way. We're gonna use an Apex repeat. So an Apex repeat is kind of used to iterate a collection on your Visualforce page. Since we have a list of wrappers and we want to iterate that, we want to use this Apex repeat tab here. And how this works is you have the value tag, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind this value tag to this list that I have here of the wrapper class, like this. Now, the second thing you have to do is specify a var here. I'm going to specify it as W. Okay, so as you can see, something weird happened here, that a page says that unknown property must read controller dot all data. I mean, it is not able to find this all data variable even though this is getter setter. So the mistake that we made was we didn't define this list as public. So I defined the variables in my wrapper as public, but I need to define this list as public too in order for it to be usable in the Visualforce page. So I come here and do that, and now this page will save just fine. Now, inside of the Apex repeat, we are gonna be printing out the checkbox and the data. So instead of just printing it out willy-nilly, I'm just gonna set a really simple HTML table here. Nothing too fancy, guys, just a way to properly print out this stuff. Like this. This is how just a standard HTML works. So we're gonna have a row inside of the repeat, and then in the row we're gonna have two TDs. The first one, or I'm sorry, we're gonna have three TD values. So now let's just print out whatever values we are getting. So since I have used this W as my variable for this Apex repeat, I can now use this W to access all the data in this list. I'll do something like W dot, and now since this W essentially represents an instance of this wrapper class, which I have defined there, because this all data was a list of this wrapper, right? And now this W variable is used to represent each item in that wrapper class. So what I can do is now I can do W dot selected here, right? And then the other thing I can do is similarly I can do W dot ACC, which is the account instance dot name here. And lastly, I can do w.acc and the third field that we queried, which was the state field, the SLA expiration. So I'm gonna print that out to here. So by doing this, we have set up an initial UI by using the Apex repeat and having printed these three values out. So let us just look how this looks like. And as you can see already, you can see that our controller is actually fetching some values and just showing them like this in here. But these are just like your read only, and there is no checkbox here yet which can actually relate back to these records for selection of the user. So now the next thing that we need to work is like associating these properties, the selected property, account name, and the expiration to certain standard Visualforce component, which will allow me to edit these out. So let's start with the selected first. What we are going to use with that is a standard Visualforce component called put checkbox like this, and don't really need a label on it because it's supposed to represent a, I guess, a selection bar, but you guys will see what I mean by that. So the value of this checkbox is gonna go with this w dot selected like this. Then I can put the TD in here. Very simple. Really, very easy. And I do this. Oh, I messed something up. Wait, what did I do? Okay, let me remove this. Oh, okay, I see. So the problem is like we are trying to use an input field like this directly on my Visualforce page, but a condition to using any Visualforce, I mean any input field is that this must occur between the apex form tag like this. So if I just go and put an apex form tag right above my outermost component like this and save it, now it will actually allow me to save my Visualforce page. So another thing that you guys need to keep in mind that you need to have a apex form tag if you want to use apex input fields in your markup. Now since we have set up this selected field right here, going from here and refresh the page, and for some reason it's showing me two checkboxes. Okay, weird. But basically, like you can see that we are able to get the checkboxes here. I mean, this is for the first row, this is for the second row, and each row has its own checkbox being printed here basically. So now let's move on and create these other fields as input fields too. Okay, so to fix the UI, for now, I've removed the extra table tag that we used that was messing up standard CSS being applied to the page block section. So if I remove it and now I refresh the page, so this is what you guys see, like a checkbox in here for each row. And then next to it, you still see the account name and the date applied to it. So now moving further, we're gonna create these others as accounts as editable too. So if you want to directly use, I mean, use an Apex attribute or I mean an Apex standard Visualforce component to make your subject fields as editable, the component to use normally is called Apex input field like this. And then we can just directly bind it to your wrapper attribute right here. And save this out. Now again, if I go back here, we're able to see that name gets updated here like this. But because of this label, we are able to like mess up CSS a little bit. So let me try and override this label. Okay, so even though I override the label, this input field is still messing up a little bit. So let me fix that by moving this page block section. This should hopefully give us a more streamlined user interface. Oh, so let me fix this little issue with the user interface. Okay, so the fix for this was really simple, guys. I just had to adjust the number of columns in the page block section. But more importantly, the way we adjusted the name field, and we're gonna use the input field here too, like this. So we're using the input field tab to bind the name and this date field as editable on my page. So now if I go back and I refresh the page, you'll see that I'm able to get all these account records in my org and all these dates that these account records have. So now let's change one thing since we're getting all the accounts with the same names. I'm gonna go ahead in my SQL query and have an order by here, which is gonna pull accounts which were modified later. Now, so this should bring in, yeah. So now you can see we're bringing in different data apart from the batch ACC named account. But okay, once you have like built this page out like this, each of these checkboxes represent each row right here. Now we need to add in the functionality to save or like delete these records from this page. So in these cases, the first thing that we need to do, guys, is we need to add the UI for it. I'm gonna add that UI in your Apex page block buttons, and let's just put two buttons in here. Both of these are gonna be command buttons with your action. I can see this, like the title is gonna be edit selected, and then there is gonna be a second button is gonna say delete selected. So let's just save these, just see how they look like in your UI. So let me add the value to these two. Yes, so instead of using the title, I needed to use the value attribute. So now our UI side of this should be ready. So you can see we got two buttons on the top and the bottom. Say edit selected and delete selected. But right now clicking these won't do anything. So now we need to like bind these with your edit and delete functionality. So the way we do that is there is an action attribute in here, if you guys can see it. So now I'm going to define the action here for both of these buttons like this. But now I actually need to define the backend functionality of this in my Apex controller. And I'm going to define it right at the end after everything. The first method is going to be called update accounts. And the way this is going to work is we're going to define a separate list first. And I'm going to tell you why are we defining a separate list. And now we need to iterate the list of this wrapper, this all data, right guys? And we need to only fetch those accounts which have the checkbox selected to them, so that we can only update those accounts who have this checkbox enabled to each of them. So I'm going to iterate this like this. W all data. Account wrap is obviously the name of the wrapper class. In here, I'm just going to use a simple if statement that if the selected checkbox is checked for this particular row, I need to add this w.acc to this list like this. And then once this to update list has been populated, I'm just going to update this right here. So this makes sure that, oh, I think we got an error. Okay, this is on the Visualforce page. So that's not an issue. Let me save this controller like this. And now our updation logic has been completed. So now we can just call this method directly here from our button like this. Similarly, we are going to build another method for the deletion functionality. This is going to be called delete accounts. And the only difference that we want to do is instead of an update, we're going to have a delete here like this. Because the rest of the functionality is same, we are iterating the list again and seeing whichever list has the selected checkbox is checked, and then we, or I mean, for naming purposes, I can name this as to delete like this and delete this out. Now I'm going to bind this delete accounts method with the delete selected button like this. And we're going to save the page out. Oh, didn't we save it already? Let me save this out and let's just wait while it saves, guys. So now, since both of our methods are set up, we just need to make sure of one more use case. So you can select any number of records here you want. So in the case of the updation, obviously any data that is updated back to the backend will be updated back in the front end automatically. But in the case of deletion, when you're going to delete any of these account records, the data on the page will not refresh to, I mean, will not automatically remove those deleted records. So a really quick solution to that is, remember we created this populate data method here. We're just going to call this populate data method again here in the case of delete. Why we do that? Because any of the stuff that has been deleted, this populate data will be called again and it will automatically just fetch all the remaining accounts, and the deleted ones will be removed from your page. So let's see this in action and understand it first. I'm going to refresh this page one time. Okay, so the first element that we have is the driller's data, and I think this account is opened up right here. Let's refresh it, and let's also open another account which says SFDC test, and that is this one right here. So I'm going to change the value in here, and is the date field not here? So let me just add the date field to the layout of the page as well, just so that you guys can see it. The SLA expiration date, here we go. And we're going to save the layout. SLA expiration date is blank on both of these. So no worries, we go to the page, change the name of this one and this one, and I populate the date as, let's say, something in on both of these, and I select both of these and I click on edit selected. Now this should have saved the records back to our backend. So let me just check if that is the case. Whoa. So yep, you can see the driller state change and the date field from the page both got populated here. Similarly, if I go to the SFDC test record, again, the 2021 date and the name got changed. Now, again, I can like uncheck the checkbox here. Let's say I'm going to delete this SFDC test change record, and I'm going to delete like 3 of these more. I'm going to click on the delete button. So here is a good scenario of what might happen. So what happened is, while trying to delete this record right here, we met some error in our Apex class. So what that means is that our code got some exception, and that is why the Visualforce page broke like this. So a good way to like handle this is implementing error messages in your Visualforce pages. And how do we handle error messages is pretty straightforward. So the first thing you need to handle these kind of scenarios is put an Apex page messages tab here, or the page messages one, I'm afraid, like this. And then while you are deleting or doing any statements which might cause an exception, just put them inside a try catch statement like this. Like this. And same way in the below method as well, where we are deleting records like this. Put this inside of the try catch. Then the syntax to add error messages is really simple. And the syntax goes something like this. So as you can see, syntax is apex pages dot add message, and then inside the add message you are actually adding a new apex page message in here with the defining a new object of it, the apex pages dot message. And then here you can see this new message object has two parameters being passed to it. The first is the severity. So if the severity, we pass the level as severity here, it will show up as an error message. There are other levels here is to like info in case you want to show a success or information message. But the severity here is error, so it will show up as an error message. And then the second is the actual error text that you want to show, which we are picking up from the exception object right here. So this will make sure if you get any error, your page will not break and instead it will show up as an error message. And what we want to do is we want to put this populate data in here. Why? So that this populate data only runs if this deletion is successful. So now let us go back to our Visualforce page and preview it again. Let's try to delete the same record that causes issues earlier. I think this was one of these. So now as you can see, we've also implemented like error messages in here, and you can see that you can see the actual error message here. And now you can like check what's wrong with these. These are not deletable because some of these account records are linked with active case records, and if that's the case, you cannot delete them. But for the purpose of this example, let me remove this. Let me just remove this SFDC test change record. I'm gonna do it like this. So as you can see, that record got deleted, and if I open refresh this link here, it'll say that the record was deleted. So this way, as you can see, you're also able to delete records in here by selecting them and able to mass edit examples in here. So this was like a high level overview of building out a complex page with your like fetching data from your SQL using a wrapper, having mass edit functionality, and adding your error messages to your Visualforce page. So I'm gonna just give you guys one look at the code. Pretty simple. And then you guys can like build something out rather easily in your org too. So I hope you guys understood this example, and I hope that you guys are able to more efficiently increase your skills in Visualforce. And see you guys in the next video.